I've a bit of a peeve with it. Like it's like this sort of condescending approach, in many ways prejudice as well. And that, like, right, let's just there's nothing we can do about it. It's just female anatomy. That's not good enough.
David, welcome to the Strong Female Athlete podcast.
And hello, and thank you very much for having me on.
I see you're in your car and you're right immersed in the coaching life. I totally understand. And at the level that you're working at, it is so insane. So props to you for showing up to this podcast.
Well, let's be real. Yeah, let's pull the curtain back. And this is my reality. I'm out on the road most days, and yeah, as I said to you there just before we sort of went live, I'm just in between sessions. It's good Irish weather. It's raining, so I'll be honest with you. An hour in the car is probably not a bad thing, but yeah, this is my office. This is where a lot of my work gets done. So yeah, we're keeping it real.
And you work at a really high level in the women's game. And I just want you to share with the audience what you're up to today and what is your current role.
There's a couple of silos to my business, I suppose. Work as a fitness, performance, running coach, whatever kind of fancy title we want to give ourselves. But yeah, look, essentially, I suppose physical preparation. The club I work with is Shelbourne Football Club. We have a very successful women's section and have done for kind of the last sort of 9, 10 years. The expectancy, I suppose, every season is to win. That's the level. You're there to compete and you're there to win. So it's quite intense, as you can imagine. Our season is interesting. We run sort of summer football, as it's called, both in the men and women. So we'd come back pre-season in January. The competitive season would start in sort of March and run to about October. So we're only kind of 5 games in at the moment, so still early stages. But we've come through the excitement of pre-season and the intensity that brings. And yeah, I suppose the league has kind of taken a little bit of shape now. So I suppose in terms of my own role, as I said, mainly physical preparation. We've a small team. We've a manager, assistant, first team coach. We've a general manager and secretary above that. And then there's essentially myself and the physio, who are, the medical and performance team. And we'll link in with sort of the club doctor and club practitioners that would look after the men's teams as well. The men's team are full-time professional. We're not. We're kind of amateur / semi-professional. Which is the makeup of a lot of the league over here at the moment. It's still very much in its infancy. It's still kind of growing. In terms of our training structure, we're 3 nights a week. But as you will be well aware, it's not just 3 nights a week. You put a lot of groundwork in, a lot of time away from that as well. And we play our matches on Saturday. So we're based kind of all around the country of Ireland. So there's obviously travel involved as well. But there is an intensity to it. But I always say I wouldn't do it if I didn't enjoy it. I'm very lucky. It's a very good group. The club itself has done a really good job at bringing a lot of young players through. It's done a really good job at sending a lot of players to professional clubs in England, if that's to be considered kind of a goal, which it is for a lot of players. And then also Irish international players as well. And I suppose appropriate for your audience as well, we probably had a little bit of a exposure a few years ago when Heather O'Reilly signed for us. She came out of retirement to come and play Champions League football, and her presence here was wonderful. She really raised the bar and brought the best out of everybody. She was an absolutely wonderful character to have around, and she had a very successful stint here as well. So yeah, so there's a lot going on. They've recently just brought in professional contracts just last year, which in a way does protect the clubs, particularly those who are bringing young players through and are obviously looking to move them on. And then obviously just in terms of professionalising the game and for players, to look after themselves as well. So yeah, it's interesting times with that. And then I suppose just quickly away from that, then I have my own private practice where a lot of pitch-based work, I suppose. I previously owned a kind of a gym space, which, like a lot of people, come COVID, I kind of got lucky. I got out of it before then, but I never went into it there again afterwards. I've stuck to a lot of pitch work. So it's a good mix of kind of professional players right down to teenagers. I'd say 70% of my players are female. And yeah, look, I suppose a lot of what I'm trying to do there is just build good foundations, good habits. Like I always say with young players, and when I'm speaking to parents, the ultimate KPI for me is a smile, and somebody coming back the next week. I'm not particularly again with the younger groups. I'm not getting too caught up in speeds or times or anything like that. I just want them staying in sport and enjoying themselves and seeing them more relaxed, more happy. When we get further down the line with the professional guys to come home and senior players, yeah, look, it's a bit more detailed. So when people get to that stage, we'll cross that bridge as we come to it. And yeah, that's kind of it, I suppose.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I think one of the things that drew me to having you on is just the work that you're doing with female athletes specifically. And when we were going back and forth on what to really dive into on this podcast, you had said to me, everyone's focusing on ACL injuries in the women's game, but what I'm seeing is something else. And we also need to pay attention to these other things and kind of just group it as a collective injury reduction strategy and performance strategy. So let's get into what you're seeing a little bit more of, because I think the ACL tends to get the highlight in the headlines all the time in the women's game.
Yeah, it really does. And look, I suppose we can preface it by saying, yeah, it is important that there is that little bit of pressure put on and continue to put on to get the best out of practitioners, to continue with the research and do what we can. But human anatomy, as we know, it's a very complex system. Football is a contact sport, it's chaos, and there's just a lot going on. So I think that in many ways, the issue is not the issue, but just what I've seen and what I've heard. It's just that fear-driven approach with the ACL injury. I think that it just puts me off a little bit. I'm like, we need to stop instilling this fear into young female athletes. Look at the rate in terms of people dropping out of sport, both male and female, but we're discussing females. But we need girls to keep playing. We need them to play beyond 16, 17 years of age. And if this fear-driven approach continues, it does. It puts people off. And I think the language around it that's used as well, we hear words like epidemic, like that's big language. And that's from, your Twitter posts right up to global media when they're discussing an ACL injury. It's a headline when it happens. And as I said, I'm careful how I articulate this because it's important, but I'm also just very conscious that we need to be careful with the message that is given, particularly to younger players. I think if we look at the athletic knee in its entirety, if we call it that, like the knee, it's this entire universe of responsibility in maintaining stability, not just in football, but just getting through your day to day. And there's a lot going on, and even beyond an ACL, we've got so much happening with patella, femur, tib, fib. We've got a PCL, MCL. It's this alphabet of chaos. And for me, what I've seen a lot of, sticking with the knee, is a lot of kind of MCL injuries over the last couple of years, which I find is really interesting. So a couple of things I will say. I think it's sort of known from research, the MCL injury, it does tend to be more prevalent in male sports. And I think it does make sense because of the power, the intensity, harder contact with tackles and that, which does make sense. But the ones I've seen, and I've seen 6 in a very short period of time, with different players, either through the team sport or through players that I've worked on. And this is over the course of maybe 18 months, which I think is quite a short period of time. 5 of those were all the same: a bad first touch, overreaching for the ball, and impact from the side. So that in itself shows you that that's a pattern. Now, as we know, the MCL, it's there to protect that force from the sides to stop that kind of knee valgus. But it just sort of got me thinking. I was like, how do we actually stop that? How do we build that robust athlete? That's the language we use a lot of the time, but how do we put a stop to that or give people more confidence in dealing with it? Because contact is going to happen, tackles are going to happen. It's a bit like the boxer, you can't put muscle on your chin. But I think a lot of it does go down to a more emotional, mental sort of prep. Aside from the obvious, when we look at the kind of hierarchy of athletic development, we obviously want to go through kind of good testing protocols, good kind of movement, work capacity, strength, power. and speed. We get all that, but I think just giving people and finding a way to give them the confidence in themselves to go in for that tackle. To be, not to be afraid to make a mistake. And this is something you were talking about my Instagram post. This is something I hammer home a lot. Like, I make 100 mistakes a week. Players will make a lot of mistakes. And that goes right down to a bad first touch. So I'm just curious, and it's something I'm exploring around, whether it's a team setting, individually, one-on-one. Do we have more of a responsibility as coaches to really hone in on building confidence and kind of inner strength, as well as, muscular strength and everything that comes with it? So that's sort of where I'm at the moment. And I will pause for a breath because I can see you're thinking there, and it's, you'll have some further questions on it. But I do hope that makes sense in terms of where kind of my headspace is at and what I've seen.
I do really like that perspective because when all these headlines come out, it really instills that fear in female athletes. And I always hate the one where it's like, well, females are this much more likely to hurt their knee than males. And it's like, well, that's not really helping. And I think with ACL, MCL, it really becomes about empowering them. And I like that you're starting to really wrestle with including the mental side of it. And I think that's where the mental side comes in, is using that empowering language. Like, let's help you perform better. Let's get you strong and resilient to play. And for them, that pumps them up more, and they don't go onto the field hesitant and just like lacking in the first step or feeling like tentative to get to the ball or to go into tackles. I just think that language is so empowering. Are there any other tools you use to just really help with that confidence?
I think creating a bit of freedom. Now, again, I talk about mistakes and errors, and you don't want to overly set the tone on that. But one thing I will say, particularly with younger athletes when they're 14, 15, and maybe they're feeling a little bit, I'm not fast enough, I'm not strong enough. And I'd asked them, I was like, how long have you been playing? 5 years. You're sort of saying, right, well, do you know what? You're going to be playing for another 20. You have so much time. And I think time is a currency, and time is a really, really good tool, particularly with a young player. The example I gave, I run marathons and I love it for my headspace. I'll never win an Olympic gold, but I just say to them, I'm 41 years of age and I'm still trying to get quicker. I said, I've been trying to do it for 15 odd years. And I said, there's no full stop. So I think using that as a sort of a runway into progress is a really good start. And you're right, just to kind of add to that, what you've said around that discussion. I have a bit of a peeve with it. Like, it's like this sort of condescending approach, and it kind of, in many ways, prejudice as well. And that, like, right, there's nothing we can do about this. It's just female anatomy. That's not good enough. The reality is, whether we're of the fate or of science, like, men or women, we weren't designed to kick a lump of leather around a football pitch. Like, that wasn't in the original plan. Like, so, we could argue that, look, the male body isn't designed for football either. So it gets a bit petty, I think, when we go down that route. Like, yeah, okay, the female anatomy, right? Or if we could go down that route of the hip angle, the Q angle, and then you're blaming the menstrual cycle, which I think is such a negative approach. If a girl is having a regular cycle, we know that is a positive. That is not something that should be, like, that's healthy. That should not be, we should not be imposing further negatives on that. Like, that is absolutely healthy. I'm very lucky with our team. They're very, very open about talking about the menstrual cycle, about their energy levels, and it's brilliant. It's not awkward at all. We've reached that stage as a sort of a staff. And the last thing I want to do is flip that progress on its head by attaching, a couple of negatives to that. So we have to be careful with that language. And again, I say we, I mean myself and the team I work with. I can't affect this globally, but obviously discussions myself and yourself and that you've had with other guests are important, and let's keep speaking about it. So Yeah, look, I think it's a very, very broad area, as we know. But I suppose to kind of the collective, and that, as I said, for me, is time, using time as a positive and reminding players they've so much time. And the absolute massive for me in terms of principles of coaching is just nailing the basics, bringing it right down to obviously good balance, coordination, consistency, and strength work. I think that word's important. It can be very easy to start a process with a young player in terms of strength work, and then it flies off in all angles. Stay consistent. Keep it simple and keep consistent. Will have better results over time than trying to trying to progress too quickly, trying to make things as complicated and as challenging as possible. As I just say to players, I want our strength training to get 0 likes on TikTok. I don't want it to be sexy. I want it to be I want it to be effective, and I want you to see and feel the progress. And I think when we say about confidence, feeling good, that's where it comes from as well. So I'm very conscious. I get very excited there. I'm throwing a lot at you there, but I do hope it's in its chaotic landing at you there, it does make some sense.
I think it's so great. And there's a lot of parents that listen to this podcast and they have really young girls who want to play at a high level in college and pro. And I love that you said, even at the highest level, we are doing the basics. And I try to preach that all the time to really young girls when their parents are trying to rush that long-term development process or have them do extremely heavy lifts and advanced exercises at age 10. But that poses more of an injury risk that could manifest in high school or college or in their 30s. So I just love that message of just sticking to the basics and having that long-term consistency and just not always rushing the process. That is so incredible coming from a coach at your level, because parents need to hear this.
Very true. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I'm all about the basics. And it's interesting. And again, we all know the influence that social media has on all of us. I have parents contact me about like doing running mechanics for their 8 and 9 year olds or their under nines team. And my advice in like a very polite and diplomatic way is I'm always saying, like, bring them to a playground. You will benefit more from going to a playground than giving me a one-on-one space with your 8 year olds. It's too disciplined, it's too structured. I don't want to take the fun out of this. So when we look at that as an example, like, that's not the parents' fault. That's just what's landed at them in terms of information and what they feel is the best for their son or daughter. So when those kind of inquiries come in, I'll always jump on the phone to kind of give that reassurance, and maybe settle a parent as well. And it goes back to time, as I said. Regarding the basics piece, I did a thing. I did a kind of a short mentorship, if you want to call it. Last year, I took on a couple of young coaches who were starting out in team sports, and I did a couple of sort of areas where I presented on communication, and then I did a little bit. I sort of gave them an insight to pre-season with the team, sort of from the previous year, and it was a wonderful compliment in many ways that the feedback afterwards, they were kind of blown away by how simple it was. And I took that as the ultimate compliment. And like, some of them are saying, like, Jesus, we just thought, like you say, for a top level, this would be really complex and detailed. And I mentioned there previously, I've had a lot of issues around anxiety and mental health, that thankfully I feel I'm at a place in my life I've sort of dealt with, and I'm doing quite well. And I just say to them, when I look at my life and as a whole, when it comes to football, I need to keep things simple. I says I get overwhelmed too quickly as a person and as a coach. And if I start creating complex sort of approaches in my coaching with a team with 25 players, I said, I'm going to destroy myself. I said, I'll lose the trust because I won't be able to deal with it. It'll affect the players negatively, because I won't be getting the best out of me as a physical performance coach. I said, I have to keep things simple. It keeps it manageable in terms of time, in terms of tracking, and in terms of quality. Context is key, as we know. Somebody could easily walk into my sessions and say, oh, that looks awful. But as our physio Nicole often reassures me when I'm having those days of doubt that we all have, she makes a really good point. She says, you meet their expectations, you just sometimes don't meet your own because your standards are too bloody high. So I think we're guilty of that sometimes. But I really do try and lead with simplicity. For me, and I said I'm keen to emphasize that for me as a coach, that what allows me to be at my best, be it with the team or be it with individuals. A really simple framework and tick it off as you go.
Now I'm curious, how often are you seeing these ladies to do an in-season strength session? Because I think you make such a good point about time, and that's the reason why you have
Mm.
to keep it simple, because I'm sure you're crunched for time with them. Am I right?
Correct.
Yeah, and we are too
Oh,
in the youth space because kids are practicing a ton.
yeah, and that's the thing. I think they have a lot more going on away from the team as well. A big thing over here would be the university slash college. A lot of the girls will be on scholarship, so they're obviously being paid a bursary where they have to play and train with the college team as well. So that's just one example of, another big training load. Excuse me. Um, so in terms of time, in terms of testing, again, as simple as possible. So about second or third week of pre-season, we'll do a Bronco run, I suppose, for that kind of aerobic piece. And why do I do it? It's because it can be done as a team. We have the space to do it. It's easy to record a time and it's easy to retest. Not easy when you're doing it, obviously.
Can you explain
Um,
what it is for the people who don't
yes,
know?
sorry. It's probably quite common over here. So your Bronco run is you're running out from a start line 20 meters and back, 40 meters and back, 60 meters and back by 5. So your average, your fast player may hit kind of. It's very different in different levels, obviously, but maybe around 4 minute 50, 5 minutes. Some of your senior players maybe sort of 5:30 or so. So, again, in terms of time, it's not eating too much up of the session for the management. And I think as well, mentally as a team, if you have them all starting and working together, it keeps people honest, and they feel like they're working together as a team as well. So we'd retest that probably maybe twice during the season. Um, in terms of the gym piece, what we would test is we'd use broad jump for power over the ground. Again, you do not need expensive equipment. You can use a measuring tape.
Yep.
And what's really cool about that is in that gym space, like you can create a good bit of competition with that as well. So, say your top three, we'll be doing a retest on that soon. And I know straight away they want to beat each other. So it'll get into little kind of groups where they're trying to beat each other. Similar with your vertical jump. Again, like if you want to write down to basics, all you need is a bit of chalk in your hand, jump up and see how high you can touch. You can have a bit of fun with it. Even if you don't have the high tech equipment or the technology. And other than that, then we do an upper body and a lower body strength test. So that is, as I don't want to say as simple, but what we will do is we'll do 9 reps, 6 reps, and 3 on a bench press. And then 9 reps, 6 reps, and 3 on a trap bar or a squat or a leg press, whatever they are most comfortable doing. We will give them the freedom to do it. And that would be kind of the basis in terms of testing. We, as I said, 2 or 3 times a year. And obviously just you'd have people who are maybe carrying, different knocks or different tendinopathies from a bit of mileage on the clock that we would sort of make considerations for if there's certain things they can't do. We're not. We have to be careful not to be absolute, I think, in our coaching. And I think anything absolute in sport can be dangerous. You have to be adaptable and flexible. So it works in terms of the time we have available and in terms of just keeping, not overwhelming the team as well. Look, they're a football team at the end of it. We want to cover as many angles as we can, but ultimately we want them out in the pitch playing football.
Now I have a question about so you do 3 reps, but not a 1 rep max, which I love. Can you explain to everyone why we might not want to do 1 rep maxes for some of those bigger lifts?
Yeah, again, I think it's a funny thing. I think your strength sometimes can become your weakness, or vice versa. But a big thing for me, and in probably everything I do, even in sort of individual rehab work and that, like I am quite cautious. But I think when we look at the intensity of the games throughout the season, everything we've just said there, of both the loads we do with the team together and also everything they have going on outside, be it other training, but be it college exams, work, whatever else they may have going on, the risk to reward ratio in terms of a one rep max, for me, it's not worth it. And bearing in mind, our gym sessions take place before our training on the pitch. You know, to do a one rep max before training, it's just not worth it. And again, I just think assessing, you're sort of saying, do we have to do it? We don't. We get our percentages with the 3, 6, and 9. So yeah, look, that's just me personally. Some people might do it. I've never done it, being honest with you. If somebody we've a bit of a down week and somebody fancies it and they ask and they want to see just how strong they are, if it's appropriate, yeah, all right, go on, push yourself. But in terms of that team piece, no, I just think, personally, I feel it's too much of a risk just to put that load on somebody throughout the season.
And I think it's one of those things that just kind of originated from American football culture. And then the rest of the sports here just like hopped on the bandwagon, started one rep maxing. And then now people are realizing, oh, maybe we shouldn't have followed American football. So it's,
yeah, I suppose what's interesting about that is with the American football piece, definitely with a lot of the speed work, a lot of that I think has transferred quite well. Over here, I've definitely seen a lot of that. A lot of the kind of plyometric work and that, I think, which has been excellent. And I think that's one thing as well that's important. And we're probably going to open another big can of worms, but just learning from other sports and other disciplines as well. Like football has been a massive part of my life, but at the end of the day, it's only one sport, and there's a lot more going on. Particularly, we talk about young athletes. There's so much people can get involved in. It doesn't have to be football, so that's an important thing maybe to consider as well.
Yeah, I want to talk about more of the youth space because you did mention there are youth players going through your pathway at the club and maybe signing professional contracts super young. That's starting to happen here in the States where you have 16, 17-year-old girls going into NWSL and not even playing college soccer. So, what are your thoughts on that and how can we kind of navigate that so that they're ready for those demands and playing against those adult women?
Yeah, and I mean, look, I think a lot of the time it is just purely based on technical ability, isn't it? That's what managers will look at, what coaches will look at. One thing I will say, there will always be an outlier. There's no doubt. There's always that one player where you're just like, wow, he or she is just phenomenal. So I definitely would accept that 100%. But yeah, I've seen a lot of it throughout here and across in England where you are seeing 15, 16-year-olds stepping up. And what I see is they have this really big impact for the first couple of months. People start to rave about them. And it's then when it kind of settles, you just sort of see the whole thing kind of leveling out a bit and they're not standing out as much. And I think that can be a struggle for them sometimes. And I think you've got to remember, we're dealing with minors. That's something we have to remember. We're not dealing with adults. If you're dealing with a 15, 16-year-old in a professional setting, you're still you're still communicating through parents, albeit they're in an adult dressing room. So, how would we treat a minor working in a sort of a corporate workspace at senior level? We could look at it that way. So I just think there's a lot of considerations there. I look back at when I was young, when I was playing, as I said, it's probably a lot comes from my concern probably comes from the insecurities I had as probably a young footballer, because I definitely wasn't ready for any kind of step up to senior football. And it goes back to sort of that approach around getting people physically ready. We have to be able to do that better. Over a pathway structure, not just at senior level, but we also have to be more kind of compassionate and open to what we're to these young players and what we're putting them through, because we talk about the women's game growing. I think it's grown in terms of the marketing and the exposure. And when I'm looking at a 16, 17-year-old appearing on a poster for an advert for a game, it's nice. Okay, I get it. But in the long term, are we putting too much pressure on them? And again, there's nothing official in all of this. This is all just my opinion and my observation based on my own experience. And I'm just very cautious about it. I mean, the alternative, do we hold them back? I don't know. Do we hold them back just based on age alone? That's the other question. I don't think that's right either. But I just think overall that there maybe needs to be, we'll hammer home, obviously, in terms of our discipline, the importance of strength training. We get that. But there definitely needs to be more of a kind of an emotional support across a pathway of clubs. And I don't know what that looks like. Is that a mental health nurse, a performance psychologist, a child psychologist? I don't know what that looks like. And it would be easy to look at what's been done, I suppose, in the men's game. But is this a little bit different? So it's a very hard one to answer, but it's definitely something I've seen. It's definitely something I try to be very aware of, and something I'll try to address, I suppose, subtly. If we're seeing players make that step up, and try and be there for them kind of emotionally as well. And that doesn't have to be loud. It's just, finding out where they are away from their football. And that's a general chat. I always say with people, start with Netflix, just get away from football and maybe start chatting, see what else is going on in their life and what else they're into to try and put them at ease. But I'm conscious I've gone off on a bit of a tangent there, Erica, but it's such, it is, it's very complex, isn't it? It's not something I think can be answered in one kind of broad sweeping statement, but it's definitely something I think we all need to consider, regardless of our roles in the team. Because whether we're medical, performance, technical staff, we have a responsibility to young players to give them that best care. And it's just something we need to be aware of. And I think it's something I'd love to see, along with many other things, included in sort of modern day degree courses, university courses, teaching people of the real picture when you go into working in high level sport or sub elite sport.
I think you're right that this is probably going to be the next piece in coaching education, is how to help these younger players who go pro super early on. And I think that emotional piece is so key. And it is hard to find the answer to what we do. Is it a therapist, or, giving them some financial advice for when they can handle their own finances? I mean, there's so many things that go into this, but I think it will be unique to every player and the conversations they have with their parents, because their parents do have to be involved in this. And of course, there are some kids that are very level-headed and they can handle that pressure very well. And the parents just need to know, is that my kid? Or maybe I should just give them a little bit more time to mature and maybe go to that level in a few years down the road. So I think parents also have to know their own kid and just have those talks, and just kind of coming back to your risk versus reward, right? Is it
Yeah.
really worth taking that step? And are there any long-term repercussions for my kids specifically?
Yeah, and I suppose one good question is what is the rush?
Right, right.
I'd kind of say to people, if you're good enough at 16, you once you keep playing and keep developing, you're going to be good enough at 20. you know, um,
And you're still gonna love it and not have as much of that
yeah,
pressure, I guess.
I think so. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I suppose a good example, maybe back in the kind of 90s, 2000s, what you did see with a lot of young male players from Ireland going to England quite young,
Mhm.
15, 16. I suppose the political kind of landscape has changed that now. I don't think you're allowed to go away till you're 18 now. But what often happened was they went away at 15, 16, and the majority came home with their tail between their legs at 2021. Whereas now, in previous years, you've seen people staying, settling into kind of a semi-pro, pro environment, getting that, gradually getting the first team experience, being in a senior dressing room, getting that strength in the legs, and then maybe going abroad then where they're 21, 22. And again, look, I know it's very different in terms of the men's game, but it's just interesting to see that flip over the course of kind of 15 years or so. I definitely think over here anyway, the gap between sort of youth level and senior is so big. It's so big in terms of that intensity, and the physical kind of outputs. And then, as well as that, when you've got a player that goes professionally to England, that jump is another big jump as well. So that's the consideration too. Like, so again, that goes back to maybe the physical discussion of how we better prepare players. But look, I understand it's all tied in as well. But you're right. Maybe the approach is to take more responsibility in educating parents as opposed to kids. And again, I think even throwing that, I'm cautious of that as well. When we say education, I think sometimes that can come across a little bit condescending. So maybe integrating parents into the process a little bit more, and a little bit more positively and productively might be a better way of the better terminology, to start fixing that process a little bit. I'm not sure, but it's interesting. It's an interesting kind of development I've seen over the last sort of 5-6 years in women's football.
So, for the parents listening, maybe they have a preteen or teenage daughter who wants to continue to play her sport and maybe play at a high level one day. What are some tips you would give them to just physically prepare? We'll touch on the physical side first.
Yeah, well, look, as I said, we'll keep with the theme of sticking with the basics. So, look, there's um, in terms of, again, we say injury prevention, but laying foundations, like you're talking, like working on balance, coordination. That's stuff you can do at home. Standing in your socks, you can do a little bit of work at home where you're just standing on one leg and reaching with your toes in front, behind, left, and right, while you're waiting for the kettle to boil or the ads are on telly. But I think, and I suppose you guys are lucky, the gym culture definitely seems to be more prominent. You can challenge me on that, but from what I can see, athletes at a young age seem to be more open to it, which is brilliant. But I think just, getting into a good environment, gym wise, I think is wonderful for young people. Because if you take away sport just for a second, someone may be on a fat loss journey. Stepping into a gym can be very, very intimidating. I think even as trainers still, it can be a little bit intimidating. But you talk to anyone who started a fat loss journey, found the right environment with a gym space. It's not about fat loss anymore. That's their community. That's their space. That's where they go to feel good. And I think if you can find that right place for your daughter, at a young age, whether that's a youth group away from your team, in a local gym, she has that for life, even away from sport. So, be open minded, I suppose, in terms of looking for somewhere finding the right fit for your daughter. But look, the basics, we just want to do the basics, as I said. Body weight squats, basic sitting down and up and down off a chair. Like, it's walking, lunges, jumping, landing. I went back to the playground. Like, don't be afraid of just having a bit of fun with it as well. And I think a really cool thing is, and I've seen a lot of this, mother and daughters, the groups and gyms, I think is brilliant. I see a lot of that here where mothers will bring their 15, 16-year-old daughters to their group and will absolutely put them to shame on the squat rack, I might add, as well. So I think you can look at that at a broader lens, away from just, a sport specific strength plan. There's a bigger piece there, I think, for parents and their children to make a bit of a connection. So I'd be interested actually on your thoughts on that, because you'll obviously have a better understanding of the culture there with gyms. And if you feel I'm a little off there, please do say.
No, I love that because anytime I have a teenage girl maybe starting a remote program, I always tell the parents, if you can maybe participate with her and do even just the warm up with her, or the recovery days, or one of the strength exercises, like, that is an amazing thing. Because I think when the whole family's on board with her journey, whether it's training or nutrition, she just becomes more successful, because parents are the role models and kids are always paying attention and parents lead by example. So I think it's always good to include everyone. I mean, better yet, it's just great for everyone's health. Maybe the parents are trying to get their health back, and strength training can really be amazing for that. So yeah, I think it's more than just sport performance. I know that sounds so cliche, but I think it's so true, because the girls who grow up with that gym training young and they love it, they're more likely to stick with it when they're in their 40s, 50s, just trying to
Yeah.
stay healthy and have longevity.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as certainly, I've, like most parents, I've learned this the hard way. But like when we try and force anything on our kids, we know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
They will rebel.
Or try to
So
tell
yeah,
them and micromanage, you need to do this. It's never going to work.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, you're right. I think if it can be more of a collaborative approach with a bit of space and freedom, it's more likely to be not just not just successful, but I think more sustainable over a longer period.
Mhm. Now, I want to come back to the knee a little bit. So, we have talked quite a bit about consistent strength training and doing the
Mhm.
basics. I just want your thoughts on where speed and running form comes into the picture, and kind of what you do with your athletes. I'm assuming it all is also pretty simple, but I would love for you to
Yes.
talk about it.
Um. Yeah. So when a player comes up to me, as I said, most of them are quite young, so we're still on that team. So it's obviously a parent I'll be dealing with, and I'll get a parent's viewpoint, which is either what they're seeing themselves or what a coach has told them. And this is always interesting because it will be very broad, and it goes back to the kind of lexicon of football and the language we use that can be quite um not cliched, but it's not very detailed, I suppose. So you might just get somebody saying, "Look, my daughter is really slow. I need her. I need her to be faster." Okay, like that could mean anything. So again, I'd absolutely, Jesus, you'd always be polite with people, and I'd let them speak and get the picture of what they're seeing. The first thing I will do when a player comes down, um, obviously try and put them at ease with recognizing some common ground. Like our big thing as well, if they show up in a jersey of a football team, maybe give them a bit of slagging that it's not the best team to be supporting. So, just try and build a bit of rapport. But um, I'm always very curious as to what the child or the player's view is on what speed is and what they think they're good at, um, or what they think they need to improve at. I'll never use what are you bad at, or what's your weakness, because you're setting a that's just you're putting that in stone. Then I'm bad, I'm weak. I don't want that. I want them feeling positive as soon as they arrive. And I think it's interesting because um, a version of speed could be, and I always use this example because it does come up when we have races and training. I finish behind Mary every time. And I always say, well, are you going to be marking Mary in a match, or is she going to be on your team? I was like, well, she's on my team. I said, well, you don't have to worry about beating Mary in a race. Like, it's only training. Um, so, you're trying to put them at ease and get their understanding of what that movement piece is. And that's just getting them, look, where are you playing? I'm a fullback. Okay, so do you feel you're very quick getting up and down the line over 40 and 50 meters? Yeah, feel good. What about when you turn and you have to cover 10 meters? I always feel they have a head start on me. Right, there's a little start point. So just getting them thinking about movement on the pitch, in terms of their position as well. And again, move away from what other people on their team are doing or how fast they're running, because look, your winger is 9 times out of 10, your winger is going to be faster than your centre back. So don't panic. A big thing as well, and I suppose, is to put them at ease with the session, because they're coming down to this pitch with this man that they don't know. And I always ask them, I was like, what do you think we're going to be doing today? And there's this fear where it's like, I'm probably going to be running and sprinting for an hour. And straight away, I'm like, look, that wouldn't work. I wouldn't have a job. I don't want to bring kids out to have them doing doggies up and down a pitch for an hour. There's absolutely no enjoyment in it. There's no progression, and there's no enjoyment as a coach for me. I said there's no development in it. Um, so putting them at ease with that. The sessions themselves are very technical, I suppose, but it's a very relaxed environment. These girls are doing enough. The lads that come down are doing enough. I just want them relaxed and thinking about their movement. So what I will do, we might do a little bit of floor work. Well, I might just integrate a little bit of prehab. And to be honest with you, that's more to start bringing in some breathing work to getting them relaxed. And that's as simple as it could be a glute bridge where I'm getting you to breathe in and then breathe out as you're pumping your glutes up. I'll do a kind of a standard sort of FIFA 11 warm up. The reason I do that is to put them at ease. It's a football warm up that they're used to. It's up and down, it's left and right, it's high knees. It's what they're used to with a team. So it's creating a little bit of a familiar pattern. I'll go into sort of short and sharp, a little bit of plyometrics, and I'll use that as kind of the movement screen. And again, very subtly. If I start using terms like functional movement screen, movement analysis with a 15, 16-year-olds, they're going to be terrified. And they're going to think you're looking for something bad off the bat, So we'll use that kind of plyo stretch as a way to have a look. So, that's going from double leg movement over the ground, going for height to single leg to dropping into a squat. And as you increase a little bit of intensity in that, it's going to tell you a lot of where they're at, of what they're good at, and just maybe a couple of areas that we can start implementing, a couple of areas, exercise and that to improve. From that, then I will go into some kind of movement mechanics, and that could be as simple as just marches over 10, 15 meters. Different variations of that, whether it's a band, arms overhead, arms out in front, hands on hips. We'll go to a double tap with skips, and just start getting them. I always say, let's start getting your hip, your knee, and your ankle working together. Use your body. Don't just use your foot, your toes. Let's start using your body. And it's a really nice way to build a bit of confidence, because the majority of people will nail that type of exercise relatively quickly. From that, we might look at a bit of acceleration, and that's half kneeling, side on, half kneeling linear. Maybe a band around the shoulders or the waist, just to get that forward lean and a little bit of power, make them feel like they're working and getting a bit of speed. From that, then a bit of power over the ground, your broad jumps, and they are perfect for that bit of competition, because once you mark down where they're landing with each land with a cone and tell them they have to beat it the next time, you can guarantee they will beat it with the next jump. So it's just a nice way to just start, as I said, showing them different movement patterns. And from that, then maybe just get our straight lines, just a few T runs, a little stop start, bit of decel on the whistle, the colour of the cones and shouts. And the sessions are generally 45 minutes to an hour. And I think, again, one of the greatest compliments is when you tell them you're 40 minutes in, they go, "Oh, that went quick."
Yes.
So when you hear that, that's a really good sign. So that's kind of the framework I use to start with. The exercises may vary, but it's probably just a good way to give you an idea of how it might shape up. And as I said to you, the ultimate sort of metric for me is that when they walk back or book for the next week and they come in, they're walking a bit taller, they're a bit more relaxed looking, and they know what's coming and they're looking forward to it. So, that's what I do, and that's what I try and do.
I love it. Again, so simple, everyone. It doesn't need to be complicated for speed training. And I love that you said that the girls enjoy the sessions. I hear the same from my athletes. They all love speed sessions, but they have to be the ones that are designed properly and simply. None of this like social media craziness with obstacles and ladders and all this nonsense. So I wanted to pull up your Instagram post that I really liked on injuries, and I thought it was really funny because you made a little meme. There's a picture of you and one of your players holding a trophy, and it says, "No one injured this season." And then right next to it, you're with the same player, head is down, and it says half the squad carrying knocks. And there's no trophy in that picture either. And the
Definitely
caption
not.
was so brilliant. You said, the reality is, no matter how great programs are, how sophisticated periodization and planning may be, the knocks will happen. Players will get injured. One bad tackle, a clash of heads, tripping up, pulled muscles. Not many players will go through their career without even a minor injury setback. Does that mean our work and physical prep is pointless? Not at all. The number one goal should always be not to do any harm, but otherwise, it's important to expose players to the stress and physical demand that will prepare them for competitive sport. I love this because I think for some of the parents listening, they are scammed into believing, at least in the private sector of performance, oh, like injury prevention program. That means if I do this strength training, my daughter will not get an ACL or MCL. It's like 100% preventable, which is such a lie. So I think this is such a honest post that we do our best. And the fact that players are getting in the gym, they do have a fighting chance to reduce injuries. But the reality is, contact sports are tough. People are going to get hurt. It's going to happen. We can't fully prevent. So I just wanted to share that because I just love that you made that post.
Yeah, that's good. I was wondering what you were going to share. So
Everyone
that
gets scared when I'm like, oh, I
yeah,
found your post.
that was quite recent. That's actually the pictures. It's actually me and the physio. That's Nicole, our physio.
Okay.
And yeah, it was. I had been seeing the two pictures, and I was like, there has to be something I can use this with. So obviously, myself and Nicole would work very closely together, in terms of rehab and everything else. And yeah, as you know, you can have great weeks, and then you have weeks where it's like, oh my god. But yeah, and you're right. Like I just say to people, we could do all the strength training, we could do everything right, and then someone drops a bottle of shampoo on their foot and they break a toe.
Yeah.
Like it's. But in a way, it's sort of, it doesn't take away from the importance of looking after ourselves, I suppose. But yeah, look, it's just another way to put people at ease. Like, look, you're gonna get a knock. It's a contact sport. Um, don't fear it, and I think, to be fair, I think to give credit to players, and certainly when I played, like, a lot of people love the physical side to it. I love getting in for a tackle and getting stuck in. I think the majority of people do. So yeah, it was maybe one more for coaches as well, because I do think as young coaches we maybe put that pressure on ourselves. Maybe you're out caught, all right, did me goal this year, we're not going to have any injuries. It's like you've already lost. That you're absolutely going to get an injury somewhere, but um there's a lot of luck involved as well, isn't there? And I think particularly, like, the dynamic, say, of our squad is very interesting. We've covered a lot there. We have a lot of really young players, but we also have like a cohort of players who are in, sort of mid to late 30s. And I kind of laugh. I just say the same with my marathon training to these players. I said, I'm at the stage where my warm up is longer than my training session because I'm trying to look after my hips. But you just see that with those senior players, like they really take their prehab seriously. They take their recovery seriously, and I think you do learn a little bit of that with experience. And I remember it was actually a professional player that said that to me, like, an injury is sometimes the best kind of education a player can have, because it can often be, even if it's minor, like, but it can often be that little sort of reminder to really knuckle down and look after yourself, particularly as you get a little bit older.
Yeah, I feel the older you get in your career, the smarter you become, and
Yeah.
it's an amazing thing. And yeah, I think with injuries, it's just we can't fully prevent, but of course, when it happens with one of your athletes, it's so heartbreaking as a coach because you second guess and you're like, "Oh my gosh, could I have saved this from happening?" And then you look back and you look at your program, you're like, "What could I have changed?" And it just becomes this rabbit hole. But I think the truth is it is a rough sport, and the two ACLs that I've had with my girls, they were contact injuries and they were red cards, tackles from behind, and it's like, well, That's kind of hard to prevent. But you still look at those and you're like, could we have like done this differently or maybe taken this recovery more seriously? And it's so hard, but I think it's just being honest about the conversation, do the best you can to
Mm.
prepare. And if you do get hurt, it doesn't mean all your work was a waste. It's just it was just unlucky, and we can't pinpoint exactly where the breakdown happened. I mean, there's just so many factors in this.
Yeah, it's so multifactorial. You're right, and yeah, that's a perfect example. Like a red card tackle from behind you, you can't simulate that in the gym. Do you know what I mean? Like that's um yeah, it's an interest. You are right though. Like I do think, and maybe it's ego more than anything. We probably do take a lot of this stuff very personal, and we shouldn't. You know, like look, if you have a squad and 15 of the squad have popped their hamstring from sprinting. Okay, we might need to have a conversation. But yeah, you're right, and definitely like even from working in the men's game, like a lot of the long term, I don't even say long term, but a lot of the kind of problematic kind of niggles injuries or reoccurring injuries are generally, ones that have been going on for a couple of years with players. And as you say, sometimes you just get that really severe one that everybody remembers. But yeah, look, I think it is just a reminder: have your principles in place, have your practice in place, have your plan. And I think as coaches, as professionals, once we have that, we've a bit of a groundwork, we've a framework, and stick to it. And these things do get refined as you go, of course. But no, look, you can't put bubble wrap around people. It's a contact sport. It's going to happen.
I think that just kind of brings this whole message together from just really empowering girls, prepare the best you can, and don't be fearful out there. Still going for tackles. Don't fear getting your knee hurt. Just play the game. I think what we talked about today was really helpful for the parents listening, especially, and the coaches who work with young female athletes. So I definitely want everyone to follow up with you. I will link your social media and your website in the caption below. So, everyone, please follow David. His work is amazing. And maybe we'll have him on for a second time to discuss more. So, if you want him to come back, like the video, leave a comment. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask. But I will see everyone on the next episode.